there seems to be a lot of, we hear it from the importers in Europe who talk to their suppliers in China, and there seems to be a lot of misunderstanding and rumors going around. A lot of people think that the decision has already been made, or that it's absolutely sure that there is going to be anti-dumping duties. So we find it important to try and keep the information going and try to provide the correct information, because it already has quite a negative effect on business. So if there's rumors, it makes the effects even worse. So yeah. On the 20th of October last year, 2017, the European Commission has initiated proceedings, which means that the European Commission is investigating if dumping is going on. And dumping actually has two components. One is dumping, which means that Chinese manufacturers would be selling at prices below their domestic prices. And then secondly, injury, but in this case there's not so much talk of injury, but rather of threat of injury. So the manufacturers are saying if the imports continue to grow as they have done since 2014, there is going to be injury to the European manufacturers. So since then, the Commission has sent out questionnaires to all different parties, the Chinese manufacturers, European importers, European producers. And they have, because there's so many parties involved, they have made a sample. And for the moment, they are checking, they are doing verification visits. That means the questionnaires have been completed by importers, manufacturers in Europe and China. And now the Commission is going to the companies to verify if they have completed the questionnaires in the correct way. In the meantime, there is another issue going on, which is obviously registration of imports. This has been requested by the European manufacturers. And registration of imports is necessary to be able to collect duties retroactively. So the Commission has until the 20th of July this year to impose provisional duties. And if in the meantime there has been registration of imports, these duties can be collected retroactively all the way down to April 2017. Sorry, 18. I'm here behind my own knife. So we are now in the process of arguing against this registration. Because we do not believe, as the European manufacturers are arguing, that there would be stockpiling going on. It is actually impossible to have stockpiling because the lead times for electric bikes are between 8 and 14 months. So what is now coming into Europe has been ordered 8 to 14 months ago. So that's totally impossible. And these long lead times are actually a result of the fact that there's kind of a shortage or a very big demand for components which are made in China or outside Europe. And these components are bought not only by the Chinese electric bike manufacturers, but also by European electric bike manufacturers. For instance, if you take the frames, frames of electric bikes are aluminium frames, and there is only one producer in Europe of aluminium frames. So this shows that all the other frames have to be supplied from China. So we are now waiting for a decision. There have been arguments and counter-arguments. This process is still going on. We are now in the process of finalizing our last argumentation against registration, and then we'll have to wait. The Commission has until the 20th of April to decide on that registration. And then, as I said, until the 20th of July for provisional duties. And then the next deadline is the 20th. The Commission has a year to decide on the actual dumping, so that would be the 20th of October, with an ultimate deadline of the 20th of January 2019. So far, nothing has been decided. And no measures have been taken whatsoever. so far there is a little, if not to say hardly any or no substantiated evidence that there is dumping going on. But on saying that, it is true that there are a lot of changes going on, specifically in the sector of electric bicycles. And these changes have quite a big influence on the whole case. But the collective of European importers is trying to fight the case based on facts and is hoping that the European Commission, or is quite confident, I think, that the European Commission will judge their decision, their ultimate decision on these facts.
But I'm not sure I agree with your assessment that things are so bad, because I mean, actually things are probably slightly better today than they were some years ago. Of course, trade is a difficult dossier, has always been a difficult dossier, and there's always been a feeling in Europe that there is an imbalance between in the trade relations between China and the EU, not so much in terms of the product coming to Europe, but rather the fact that European companies struggle to really penetrate the market in China. Yeah. And I think I'm not so sure about this particular commission. It was true in the past, but in the past there was a use of trade instrument also to say to the Chinese government, look, we really need to make this work, kind of win-win situation, so you need to open up a little bit more. I think the overall climate now is not as bad as it was in the past, and probably yes, because of trade now is so much discussed around steel and metals, but I think there are definitely some common grounds between China and the EU. Climate change is definitely one issue where things go well. So hopefully this case will definitely be decided on technical grounds and not on political ones. Yeah, I help Annick and the team, and then I work in a lobbying firm, public affairs relations, for on behalf of CCME and Chinese manufacturers. Yeah.
We had a hearing on the 16th of January, and there the meeting included 5 importers, which was important because the European market for electric bicycles is not a uniform market. There's a big difference between, for instance, Belgium, the Netherlands, Germany on the one hand, and Southern Europe, Eastern Europe. So we kind of wanted to explain to the Commission what the intricacies were of these different markets. So we had 5 importers representing different markets, and this really allowed, I think, the collective to go quite deep into the argumentation and explanation of their point of view, and I think it was very helpful to make the Commission understand a number of issues which maybe were not so clear from just a written submission. So this was really very helpful. And also I think it was helpful for the Commission to see that there were real people behind this collective. And also people who have companies, who have been on the market for a number of years, that it's not just an issue of shoving a few containers or transfer, from China to Europe, that it's really companies that employ people, have long-term plans. No, it's very difficult because a lot of companies have started with conventional bicycles and then have moved on to also do electric bicycles. So there is no real split in employment, for instance, or even a few years ago I have done calculations for the whole bicycle business, but at that time the electric bike business was by no means where it is now, and we then came to 90,000 for the whole of Europe. But in the meantime, I'm sure it's a lot more. But that is bicycles and electric bicycles. As for importing companies, I don't know how many, or companies involved in electric bicycles, but I saw recently some statistics for the Netherlands, and that included around about 40 or 50 brands. So it's really many dozens of companies who are involved in the business. Sales are, for the moment, sales of electric bicycles, I think 2016 was at 1.7 million. So, and it's growing steadily year after year. So that means that employment is growing as well. There is a very important aspect which is very particular to this case. I think I'm not familiar with the solar panel case, but if the Commission would decide on dumping or anti-dumping measures, then it's almost evident that anti-circumvention measures are going to follow. And if that happens, that is going to be a real problem for Europe, because there is no way that there will be sufficient supply of components, not even for the so-called European manufacture of electric bicycles, to meet the demand. So there we are very worried, if all this would happen, that there's going to be a shortage of electric bicycles. And then when you look at the whole story in the framework of climate change, mobility problems and so on, this kind of goes against the rest of the policies of the European Union. And it's definitely not in the interest of the consumer. So that is really a big worry.
It's also a good point to look at it, because it's environmentally good and for the climate change and stuff like that.
Yes.
In that respect, the two cases are quite similar, because you have the European Commission making strong push in certain policy areas, climate change, and in this case, I mean, solar panel was climate change and renewables. In this case, you could say climate change / green mobility. So advocating very strongly for the development of industries, and on the other hand, kind of in a matter which can be somehow seen as inconsistent, imposing limitation on the development of the market. Now, that said, I'm sure that, and I'm not a spokesperson for the Commission, the Commission would tell you, yes, fine, we understand this, but the development of the market needs to be done in a rightful way, hence the case. It's a bit of always the kind of the response they will probably give you. Development of an industry for sure, but in a correct framework, abiding to international law. So that's the challenge. But it's true that from consumer it's an issue, because it's in the same case we want cheap bikes, and we want to, like the same way we want installers wanted cheap solar panels. Provided the quality is there, everybody was happy. So there's an apparent contradiction there.
The European suppliers are typically very active in the high-end markets with very high average prices. For instance, Belgium, the Netherlands, average prices of electric bicycles sold is around about 2,000 euros. Average price, yes. Average selling price. If you take the UK, France as an example, you rather have 1,000 to 1,200 euros. So if supply would be limited as a result of anti-dumping measures and potentially anti-circumvention measures, this is the range that's going to get hit the hardest. And these are the developing markets. I mean, Belgium, the Netherlands, Germany, there's already a lot of electric bicycles on the road, whereas France and the UK, Southern Europe, Eastern Europe, these are young markets. And typically Eastern Europe, at the hearing there was a Hungarian importer who explained to us that their electric bicycles are used by people, elderly people and people who live in the countryside, because they cannot afford a car, but they can afford an electric bicycle. So for them it is a vital means of transport. At the same time, they cannot afford the electric bikes which are sold here in Belgium or in the Netherlands or in Germany. They need lower-end, mid-range bicycles. And this is where the problem is going to be hitting the consumer the hardest. The big difference between the case involving the conventional bicycles, because of course in the business this case is a historic case. It's been going on since 1993. And we believe that it's been possible for it to continue so long because there has been no counter-argumentation, yes. So we're very happy that it's different in this case. But in the meantime, there have been a lot of changes in the whole business, and that's also an explanation why companies are rallying behind this initiative. There's, first of all, the changeover from conventional bicycles to electric bicycles. So if you look at the European companies, they all started with conventional bicycles, so non-electric, and then added electric bikes to their offer. But for the moment, the sales of conventional bicycles are going down. So they are under pressure. and they have to kind of fill the gap with growing electric bike sales. And secondly, I think a very important phenomenon is that there's huge changes going on in the distribution. Conventional bicycles were sold by specialist retailers, brick and mortar shops, and the conventional bicycle manufacturers, they had their retailers and worked with them. Now, there's a lot of new companies on the market who have started with electric bicycles and only do electric bicycles. They're not active in conventional bicycles. And when they got on the market, they were not tied to any distribution channels, so they had a free choice of choosing either specialist dealers or going through the internet, of having a combination of the two. And that is what's happening, which allowed them to develop new business models, and they were not tied to the margins which were in place for the old companies. And that's a bit the battle which is going on for the moment as well.
That their interests are being well represented and defended in Europe. That said, I think as a whole, as an industry, it's probably not as matured as other industries. Therefore, there is a sense, it's a lot of different companies, not of the same size. They not all have the global reach. And this kind of work requires, takes a lot of time. It's very technical. It's not always that you have the resources to deal with this. So it's not, one should not confuse, people being extremely busy developing their business with the fact that they have to deal with situations like this. It's quite unusual. And you have to be, usually it's global organizations are able to dedicate resources to do this. But in this industry, it seems that, it's smaller companies, and therefore...
So there's not a very big one, such as, say, Huawei or this kind of...
I don't think there is a...
Giant, yes. Giant is... but Giant is... wants to, how can I explain it? We have communication with Giant, and but Giant is, how can I explain it? Yes, Giant is representing itself, but importantly, we are the collective is supported by Bafang, and Bafang is really a major player in the electric bike business.
Is Giant a Chinese mainlander or Taiwanese?
Taiwanese. But with factories in China. But I think what is important with this case is the learning process, because even for the importers, it was the very first time that they got engaged in this kind of an activity. And it kind of takes time for them to start realizing that there is a way of arguing and defending themselves. So let alone Chinese companies who are geographically much further away from the European Commission and further away from the whole political process. It's not always very, very easy to understand that. But I think it is important, and an important learning process, to see that you can argue and you can do something to defend yourself in these instances.